Utah missed out on two recruits this weekend, but they did land a commit and are still in the running for other recruits. We're giving you your Utah recruiting rundown on this Monday edition of Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. If this is your first time listening to our show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with all of you in the YouTube comments as well as on social media. We can follow our show at Locked On Utes on X today. Today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by FanDuel. You can make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. You can visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. My name is JT Wistricll, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined on today's show by Dante Guardi of UteZone. And Dante, we're going to do a little bit of recruiting action today. First, talk about some guys Utah missed out on, talk about a cornerback they landed, and a couple of the other upcoming recruits that Utah recently had out to campus and got named to their final 3 and 4 for Utah. Exciting things. But normally we like to start with the positives, but I thought we'd start with the negative because I saw some people obviously a little frustrated and upset, understandably so, that Utah did strike out with 2 recruits, one of those being 3-star offensive lineman Darius Afulava, who does go just right out to Skyridge High School, so in Utah's backyard, and the other guy in Digi Ahosi. I apologize I definitely butchered his name, but 2 recruits that, or a Jose, as I meant to say, 2 recruits that Utah was in on, 2 3-star guys that, look, just didn't end up coming to Utah. Felt like they found a better opportunity with Washington as well as with Oklahoma. And I know some people get frustrated and be like, hey, those are bad misses for Utah. I've seen things like even Utah recruiting is a bad spot. And I just think all the time we overreact to recruiting announcements like that. And I think the truth is we all talk about one of the things we love about Utah football, Dante, is that no individual is bigger than the program, which is especially true for Utah. So why would we overreact when an individual decides not to come to Utah, when Utah has other offers out at those exact positions who are 3 stars as well, when Utah also has guys in their current room that are more than capable of starting? And if these guys had committed, we would have been excited they're going to commit, but just because they're coming to Utah doesn't mean it's going to all work out and it'll be like they're going to be an all-star and all things of that nature. I just feel like too often in the negative pendulum swings when it comes to recruiting. And the truth is that Utah has still in a really good spot. And like I said, just no individual is ever going to be bigger than a recruiting class.
Recruiting is one of those things that it's really easy to overreact in regard to, simply because we haven't even seen these guys play a snap of college football yet. And when it comes to these 2, and you look at the schools that they did end up picking and the respective positions that they play, it's kind of whatever. There's not really a whole lot to be upset about. And like you said, in recruiting, there's just another guy to go out and get. And I'm not really concerned about Utah's ability to recruit players, especially of like that high 3-star caliber. We've seen Utah get a lot of players in that range. The players that they want most, they tend to do well with when it comes to players in that sort of star range. But with Deji, it was like he went to Washington. You look at who Washington had at receiver this past year. It was Romo, Jalen Polk, Jalen McMillan. I mean, they had some really good players there. And obviously they're moving to the Big Ten. So a little bit of a appealing reason to choose them, I guess, as well. So, I mean, it makes sense. And then with the other one, Darius, it was Oklahoma. I mean, Trent Brown is the best offensive lineman in the NFL right now. He went to Oklahoma. So, I mean, there's a plethora of reasons to pick Oklahoma as well. And not to mention, they're in the SEC. Sorry, I just had a couple things just drop from my desk. But yeah, they're in the SEC. So obviously a lot of pull there. And Brent Venables, I think he's honestly building something kind of nice there. I won't lie. I've always been a fan of him. I was a fan of him when he was defense coordinator at Clemson, and they were pretty bad his first year. I think they were like 6-7, 6-6 or something like that. But I mean, they had a big step in the right direction this year, and I think that the move to the SEC might hit him in the mouth pretty hard at first. But I think Venables is a good coach, and he's building a respectable program there. And likewise with Jed Fish over at Washington. You saw what he did at Arizona, and I mean, he did great. I mean, I think the results speak for themselves in that regard. Arizona was so bad where he got there. They were the laughing stock of not only the Pac-12 but Power 5 football in general, and he brought them to a great position. And obviously now at Washington, looking to build off of what Kalen DeBoer built there, which was once again another great turnaround too. They were 4-8 with Jimmy Lake in 2020, or I think it was, and then DeBoer came in and just took them to the playoff. Obviously, took them to the national championship game. So a lot of respect for his program as well, and the program that he's built at Washington. So I mean, the players that Utah's missing out on here, it's not like the players are like bagging on Utah or anything like that. There's no reason to really be concerned about them missing out on these players, because it simply came down to them having appealing offers and taking them. I mean, Utah's going to get the guys they're going to get eventually, and it all comes down to what they do when they're actually in the building. Everything now is obviously relevant, but less relevant than what happens when they're actually on the team. So no reason to overreact, in my opinion.
Exactly. Utah will find other recruits and other guys that come in. And, it feels great whenever Utah lands a recruit, because you're like, yay, that's a guaranteed guy in the room that has a chance to be really good. But the truth is, Utah will eventually land that guy who has the chance to be very good. Just like we have to wait a little longer in the case of not getting Darius, not getting Deji right now. And you also just hinted at something that's becoming the truth and reality in college football is Utah and all of these Big 12 schools are going to frequently lose out to the SEC and Big 10, not just from an exposure standpoint, but look, NIL is a large part of the conversation. I'm not saying that this is not inside information. Like, I'm not saying they got great NIL deals there, but we all know the Big 10 and the SEC have more NIL money to use than the Big 12. So if that was a part of it, I just wouldn't be surprised. And I think as the revenue gets more disproportionate, that we're going to see more and more of that. It's going to be tougher for schools like this Big 12 schools to land and keep recruiting pace with those other programs. That doesn't mean you still can't build a really good program. We talk about this all the time. Utah became Pac-12 champions, not just because they landed a Lander Barton and a Clark Phillips, right? It's because they landed other really good game-changing recruits under the radar guys too. Utah will still land their couple of high-quality 4-star guys, the Isaac Wilsons, the Garcias, the Lander Bartons. They'll do that, but Utah has to hit better on the 3 stars and lower guys than those other programs like the USC and the Oregons, who they beat the last go around, because the truth is, like we said, just the college football landscape is continuing to shake up, change, evolve. And if Utah is losing out to programs such as these, that's where I'm not going to be majorly concerned, because they have other guys they're going out recruiting for, and Utah is far from the only program losing out to these Big 10 schools. As long as Utah can beat a lot of the Big 12 teams out for the top recruits that they get named into the final 3, this Utah team's still going to be in a very good spot. And Dante, even at the end of the day, I go back to this. I just trust who this coaching staff brings in. I know we get enamored with the stars and everything there, and trust me, I'll be fired up if Jerome Miles commits to Utah too. But Utah has always made the most of the guys they've had recently under Kyle Whittingham. So why would I expect things to change?
Yeah, there's really no real reason to, in my opinion. And when you take a look back at some of the best players Utah's had in the past decade, it was guys that weren't really recruited at all. Like Zach Moss was not recruited like at all. You go back to his 24/7 page, he was rated like a very low 3-star recruit. Dude got like nowhere near as many offers as you expect the leading rusher in Utah football history to, So, I mean, Utah's been excelling at finding diamonds in the rough, especially on the defensive side of the ball as well. You think back to like Julian Blackman, Bradley Anai, a lot of guys from the state of Utah, especially on the defensive side, who ended up just being bona fide studs for Utah, despite not being recruited super heavily. So there's not really a reason to panic if Utah's not landing the upper echelon guys. Obviously, it's nice when they do, and it's great when a freshman comes in and just starts right away, like we kind of saw Clark Phillips do in that COVID season and Jalen Johnson do. And I think it was 2017 when he did that. He just stepped in, and it's nice when you have players like that, when it's like you watch him make a great play and you're like, wow, and Utah's still going to have him for 2 more years after this at least. Like that's not a terrible spot to be in, So it's obviously great to welcome those types of players, but at the end of the day, I mean, I trust this coaching staff as well. And you look at, I know we're going to talk about him in a minute, but I read that article about Jonathan Cunningham and the teams that he's thinking about picking. And that was one of the things he mentioned about Utah, was the continuity of the coaching staff and how it really feels like a family, and how that's playing a big factor in his decision-making. And obviously he had Utah as a top 3 school. So we'll see what happens. But obviously that's something that the recruits take note of as well. And as they should. And those are the types of players that Utah should be attracting, because you look back at, I think it was Saban or Kirby Smart had a quote. They were talking about the NIL and all that, and how players' parents are coming in and just asking how much money they're going to make, rather than like getting to know the people that are essentially going to be father figures and parental figures for their kids for the next 3-4 years, whatever it might be. Like they're asking about money rather than things that are, I don't know, more that were valued more so 5-6 years ago than they are now, simply. So it's good that Utah is attracting, I guess, their target audience. And yeah, like you said, I don't think there's really a reason to panic at all. I mean, Utah's going to do their thing, and that's where they've really excelled, is at developing players, and there's no reason to believe that that's going to fail.
We got to talk about some of these other recruits, but like, I just feel, in Deji's case, he was an athlete, right? Could have been a quarterback or a wide receiver. I like a lot of the young receivers that Utah's continued to add. Even if they don't get Jerome Miles, right? Like, there's lots of young and exciting talent. Utah added some strong transfers to the receiver room. I feel good about the present and future of the Utah receiver room right now. How about the Utah offensive line? There are 3 4-stars in that room who are at a minimum going to be here for another 2 years. And that's without, and then you're just like, okay, who are the other 3 stars that you're going to put up there, get in there? Maybe you land another 4-star. Like, it's just, I feel good about those rooms. I feel good about Utah's ability to land other recruits, because that's what they always do. So I'm not going to panic. Utah's 2025 recruiting class is incomplete. So why would we act negatively about it when it is incomplete? I think that's important for us to keep in mind. I understand when we watch these guys, they take their visits and all of that, we get attached to them. We want them to come to our schools, and we get upset when they don't. But Utah has lost out on a lot of recruits. They have been fine, and I feel like it's the same situation here. But we are going to talk about a guy that Utah got to land a commitment from to the University of Utah, as well as got to talk about some of the other guys who named Utah to their top 4. We'll be doing that very shortly. But first, want to dive into our fantastic friends and the great offer they have going on. It's FanDuel Sportsbook. I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, the NHL, the NBA, they're all gone. We just get fewer games. And the sports, they're just not sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So you can head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most of your summer. And that starts with Major League Baseball. There are so many great games going on as we gear up for All-Star break coming up. Gonna have a little bit of a lull, but then we'll be diving back into that. But you can check out everything for the Home Run Derby, as well as all the other things going on in the Major League. How do you think your team is going to finish it off this season? We're hoping that Utah is going to get a baseball team, so why not check out some of the MLB action by heading over to FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Dante, talked about 2 recruits Utah missed out on, but they did land a commitment from Jason Stokes Jr., 3-star corner, who is a top 100 corner in the class of 2025. And he's a guy, when I turn on his tape right away, here are the things that really stand out to me. This is a guy who just does a great job tracking and playing the ball in the air. He's got good hands. He gets physical, too. A number of his tackles really stood out to me as the guy who does a good job of, hey, a defensive end wasn't able to set the edge. No problem. He can get around the receiver trying to block him and lay it down on a running back that's not going to be able to escape his grasp. He can line up on the outside on an island, just got good hips, keeps that tight coverage too, and does a good job staying tight without grabbing too, drawing that pass interference, and he can make those touchdown saving tackles too if necessary. This feels like a guy that Sharif Shaw and Morgan Scalley are just licking their chops. They got to be fired up that this guy is a Utah Ute, because like we talked about in the last segment, these are the types of guys that have the chance to be really good at Utah.
So for me, the main things that stood out, like you pointed out, kind of similar, I guess. I really liked his instincts and ball skills. Kind of like you said, the ability to track the ball when it was in the air. Yeah. Oh, that was really impressive. There were a couple times when he got beat too, and his ability to read the ball in the air was what made the play at the end of the day, rather than the initial route that was ran by the receiver, which was good to see as well. And 6'1" and can run a little bit. I mean, he's still got another year of high school ball left, so that was great to see as well. Pretty good all-around pickup, in my honest opinion. Like you said, this is a guy that Scalley and Shaw are definitely licking their chops over, and yeah, I mean, really no downsides at all. Obviously, it's like all highlights, but I'm very curious to see what his senior year ends up looking like, because it was really impressive. The film from last season was, and yeah, it was the ball skills and instincts that stuck out the most. And versatility as well. They lined him up all over the field, and he looked pretty comfortable playing wherever, in the slot, outside. Yeah, I mean, if you're playing in the slot and you're 6'1", that means you got to be pretty fast as well. And the film showed that he was pretty lengthy kid too. So it'll be interesting to see how he kind of fills out his frame and gets how much bigger he can get after a year or two on campus. But yeah, very solid pickup. Going to be fired up to watch him take the field when the time comes.
Recruits get brought into Utah all the time off the potential of what they could do. But one thing I just feel like so often you have or you don't are elite instincts. I just think that's something that is very hard to teach and coach and get it to adapt. Just like if you just have that ability to find, locate the ball, close in, make a play on it. Like you said, even when you get beat, to react. I love that you mentioned that as well, because that does happen several times on his film. That's where you get excited. And I just when you watch this guy, you can see the reasons why, if it works at the University of Utah, because as we discussed, recruiting can be all over the place. You never know what's going to happen. Guys work here, they might transfer and work somewhere else. You can see why he'd have success at the University of Utah. So excited to see Stokes get up to campus and have the opportunity to make a great career for himself at the University of Utah. And Utah beat out some good recruits to land him as well too. Yes, Dante?
Yeah, I was going to add that he took a visit to Utah, I think it was 2 weeks ago, but then he took 2 other visits after that. So the fact that usually people expect a player to commit to the schools that he takes like a later visit to, because they just have an inherent advantage. That's kind of the way it's looked at. So it was good to see him stick with Utah despite taking visits after the fact. And that's what tells me that he's really locked in. The fact that he took visits after the fact, but still went back to Utah, that they made a strong impression. And Utah did beat out some good schools to get him. So it's always nice to check out the other schools that are interested, because that kind of gives you a little bit of a more well-rounded perception of how people who actually get who like how the coaches actually view him. The people that are going to be working with him, how they get along and whatnot. So that's always encouraging to see.
I mean, Utah is one of the schools that's mentioned as DBU. I mean, you don't even need to take my word for it. EA Sports named Utah one of the top DBU schools recently when they did those rankings. One of the other schools who was up there was LSU. It was actually the last school he took his visit with, June 21st. And Utah beat out LSU, as well as some of those Big 12 teams, TCU, Arizona, and Texas Tech, which that's what you love. They beat out one of the bigger SEC teams, and that is what Utah will be able to offer. They will lose a lot of recruits to the Big Ten and the SEC, NIL, opportunity to play on a bigger stage, bigger brands, all of that thing. But Utah's still a pretty good brand, and you have a chance. You have a better chance of playing right away at Utah if you are one of those top recruits, as compared to there's going to be a lot of 4-star DBs in that room at LSU. So and Utah's defensive back room is incredibly competitive, but I'm just saying from a star standpoint, that's where Utah gives these guys an appealing opportunity to look at it. So Utah is still going to continue to be one of the strongest places recruiting wise, and they'll have a chance to compete with some of the big dogs. And man, is Utah trying to compete with one of the biggest, because Jonathan Cunningham, the 4-star linebacker out of the state of Texas, he's actually from Fort Worth, 6'3", 190 pounds. We've talked about him a few times on our show. Outside linebacker prospect, just an incredible. He's just the kind of guy, linebackers just don't move like him. That is why he is a 4-star, to be able to move that quickly. He's got that instincts aspect too. The guys that move that fast can shoot through gaps and still be incredibly physical and make tackles. It's why he's a 4-star. And it's why he's also caught the eye of Texas. It's Utah, Texas, and TCU vying for the services of Cunningham. And the fact that you talked about earlier, Dante, he speaks glowingly of Utah, I think is a major plus, because this is the type of linebacker with the skill set I've seen that we've witnessed other linebackers thrive at the University of Utah. And they already landed one 4-star linebacker in this class in Thatcher. I'd love to see them try to add another.
Yeah, most definitely, especially over a couple of Texas schools. I mean, he's from the state of Texas, so obviously got to work extra hard to beat out those the 2 hometown teams, I guess. But I mean, it'd be another tremendous addition to the room. And I feel like I talk about this every time I come on here, but Colton Swan is such a dang good linebackers coach. It's like, why would you not want to play for him, man? It's really shocking the track record that he's put together in such a short amount of time. Like, he kind of just got to Utah and just started pumping out like draft picks year in and year out and developing guys to a much greater, I don't know, extent than I ever really imagined, honestly, to put it simply. Like, there were just guys that weren't really talked a whole lot about when you broke down Utah's recruiting class, who ended up shooting to the top of the depth chart and ended up becoming some fantastic players like Devin Lloyd, Karene Reed. Neither of them were even like considered great recruits by any means. They were both towards the bottom of Utah's class in their respective years, and both ended up just fantastic. Obviously, Krene still on the team, but I mean, Devin Lloyd, first round draft pick, that speaks for itself, obviously. So why not come and play for, in my opinion, a top 3, arguably the best linebackers coach in the entire country, undoubtedly the best in the Big 12. So TCU, I mean, it's going to be tough to beat them out because obviously it's a Texas school, but I mean, I feel like when push comes to shove, TCU is a school that Utah should be beating out when it comes to recruiting. I mean, they had the playoff run a couple years back, but I mean, especially for defensive players too. Like when you think of defense, Utah is one of the schools that kind of comes to mind. Whereas when you think of offense, TCU's the school that probably comes to mind a bit more. So maybe if he was a receiver or something like that, TCU would be a little bit more of an appealing destination. But a defensive player, when it comes down to Utah and TCU, I feel like Utah should have the upper hand more often than not. Texas, obviously, on the other hand, a little bit tougher because it's an SEC school. But when it comes down to Utah and Texas, Utah offers the opportunity to play snaps early in your career. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to every decision, obviously, and it's going to come down to the connection that he has with the coaching staffs of each school. But he did mention, like I said earlier on the show, that Utah, he liked the continuity of the coaching staff and how and the themes of camaraderie within the program. Whereas Texas, I know their defensive coordinator now, it's Johnny Nansen, who came from Arizona like within the last year or so. I can't tell you exactly when, but I know he was Arizona's defensive coordinator relatively recently. So a little bit more turnover at Texas. And obviously when you're at Texas, I feel like a lot of the assistants are going to the NFL. Like it's a lot of up and coming type guys who are looking to springboard their career into an NFL career. Whereas Utah, it's like we said, I mean, it's just there's the themes of continuity and camaraderie. And these coaches have been on Utah for 6-7 years. I mean, they've had the opportunities to leave, to go to the LSUs and the Bamas of the world. And they turn it down to stay at Utah. So I feel like when it comes down to most of those guys, it's like if they were going to leave, they probably already would have, like the offers are coming. We saw we saw Kyle Whittingham get offered by Tennessee and USC. I think 2 times, like in the same year. I think it was 2015, and everyone was saying he's going to leave. He's going to leave. He's going to leave. And I mean, he hasn't, obviously. So we're not complaining. So obviously, like I said, pros and cons to each school. There's pros and cons to each school, and it's going to be interesting to see who he picks. I think it was the 7th of July.
July 7th. Yep.
Yeah, so
July 7th. It's coming up here very quickly. Also, back to your point on TCU. Look, they did make the national championship, but then they didn't make a bowl game last year. So, like the fact that that's the swings they can have as a program versus why is Utah appealing? Not just the consistency you have in a coaching staff, also the program. Think about all the injuries last year, and they still found a way to go 8-4 in the regular season. I know the bowl game wasn't fun, but what matters is Utah was still 8-4, which there's a lot of teams that would love to have that, even when they're fully healthy. I mean, that's what makes it crazy what Utah was able to do
in the nation as well, I'd argue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's tremendous what this Utah football program has been able to do as of late. And look, getting Cunningham would be fantastic. We'll see what he decides to do on July 7th, but we get to find out a day earlier what Tavien McNair is going to be doing, because he is going to announce where he'll be playing July 6, 2024. His Final Four include, he's a wide receiver, 6'3", 180. His Final Four includes Cal, Kansas, UNLV, and Utah. And this is a guy who can win at all 3 levels, a strong route runner to me, who's got good hands, doesn't shy away from contact. It'd be another really nice wide receiver pickup for the room. And I think Utah's got a really good shot here. If we look at the other schools in the running, once again, like just taking a breakdown to it, I know that Utah doesn't have the greatest track record for pass catching wide receivers as of late, but Devon Bailey was just drafted in the 7th round. Feel like he would have had a chance to go even higher if Cam Rising was healthy. This feels like the Utah offense should be, it's the most explosive it's been in the last few years. And I know we said that last year, but we didn't get a chance to really see it without Cam Rising. And some of the additions have me very excited. So, getting to play at this level on, obviously that's where just the opportunity to play at the Power 4 level now is where you think that hopefully Utah can beat out UNLV, Cal going over to the ACC. Well, see how that transition goes. But of the groups here, and I know Kansas has had a strong turnaround too, but it does feel like that Utah is in the best position of these current programs. Kansas, once again, being up there, as we stated. But, from McNair, a California guy, Utah not as far from home either. Wouldn't be surprised at all to see him end up at Cal, but this feels like a guy that Utah would have a chance at, and he's got the skill set to be a successful wide receiver at the University of Utah.
Most definitely. I'd agree with everything you said. I think Utah's in a great spot to land McNair. And interesting profile as well. I love seeing the kids from Orange County. That's where I'm from, and especially Centennial. I mean, that's a high school program that's consistently in the upper echelon of schools in Orange County, and it's even more so impressive when you take into account that it's a public school. It's like them and Mission Viejo are both really elite high school programs. So it's always nice to see players from either of those two, because you know that they're gonna make the jump to the college level more seamlessly than any other than most other kids would. So I like that. And when it comes down to the other schools that he's considering, like you said, Cal. I think still so wild to me that Cal is in the
I
in the
know.
SEC. Like, it just doesn't sound right.
Weird.
But I mean, that's where we're at now. I don't think he'll end up committing to Cal. Honestly, I think Cal's kind of a tough. They're kind of in a tough spot with the whole ACC thing. I feel like they were kind of they got the short end of they were one of the many teams that got a short end of the stick throughout this whole process. The travel isn't very ideal. I'm not sure who their coach still is. If it's Justin Wilcox, I'm pretty sure it's still him. It's still him. Yeah, yep. He's a very defensive minded coach. So and their offenses have been historically like awful since he's been the coach. I think he's been the coach since 17 or 18, and they had some seasons where they were like locked down on defense. Like, I remember they had one game. They beat Washington, who was like really good at the time, like 14-10 with like 2 pick sixes or something crazy like that. Like, they're a defense first program with Justin Wilcox at the helm, most definitely. So I'd be very shocked to see an offensive player choose Cal at this point in time when he has a couple of other great options. And Kansas, who we've seen on the come up with Lance Leipold, and their offense has been pretty electric, honestly, with Jalen Daniels, quarterback, even Jason Beam. I mean, both of them showed some good stuff in the prior seasons. They've had a potent offense, but I mean, Utah's just been more consistent. Like, Kansas is in a fine spot. Like, this isn't by no means shade on Kansas, but I mean, Utah's made the conference championship game like 4 of their last 5 years. Something good. They're winning football games at a very consistent rate, and they're doing so by playing both sound offense and defense. At the end of the day, when it comes down to it, that's just the truth. And Utah's offense, since Andy Ludwig has taken over, has become so much more reliable. I mean, they had their crescendos when Troy Taylor was at the helm and other guys as well. But I mean, it was really when Ludwig came in and they really built that identity. And you've seen it just take place when it comes down to the numbers that get posted at the end of the season, points per game, yards per game. They've taken such a step up when it comes to yards per game. Like, I mean, a few years ago, Utah quarterbacks, like before Tyler Huntley, were struggling to consistently throw the ball for more than 200 yards a game. Whereas now it's like that's the given. If it's anything less, it's probably because Utah's winning the game by 30 points and the quarterback's not throwing the ball enough times to even accumulate 200 yards. So they've taken a lot of steps in the right direction when it comes to offense, and have become a much more appealing destination for offensive players. So it'd be a fantastic to see McNair choose Utah when it comes down to it.
Yeah, it'd be fun. Cunningham, McNair. It's just fun to monitor the recruiting cycle, and it seems to never stop. There's always news and everything coming up. So that is what we're going to continue to be diving in and discussing on Locked On Utes. So make sure you guys keep it all locked in with us here. Dante, always great having you on, man. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be on. Thank you for having me, JT.
Make sure you guys head over to UteZone, check out all of Dante's work and everything else that the 24/7 team at UteZone has going on. Hope you'll be back with us tomorrow. We'll be doing a fun episode talking about the current state of the Big 12, as well as continuing to get to know some of our Big 12 opponents. We'll be talking to the host of Locked On Cougs, and not Jake Hatch, the Houston Cougars, as we'll be breaking down what Houston will be bringing to the Big 12 and their matchup against Utah. That will be on tomorrow's Locked On Utes.